Well, welcome back from the Easter holiday. I know our editor Davis Hunt did an amazing interview in our time slot last week talking about weather manipulation and had a really great guest on. But I'm glad to be back on Culturally Appropriate with you all heading into spring. So we have a great show planned for you today. First, we're going to talk to Roderick Ledbetter from Calloway's Lamp and Shade. He's one of the most interesting people that I know, and I've known him a long time. So he's going to talk a little bit about his business and what it is that he does. Next, we're going to talk about the new Ghostbusters movie, Frozen Empire, and some of the political motivations behind it. And as always, we're going to end with our weekly film rundown. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to introduce Rod from Calloway's Lamp and Shade. So,
hey, how are you doing?
I'm having trouble calling you Roderick because I didn't know that was your name until recently. So I've always just known you as Rod, but it's a very cool name.
Yeah.
Awesome. So as I said in the intro, you're probably one of the most interesting people that I know. I've known you since high school. You've just got such a cool job, and you're somebody that has been doing this job since I've known you and really invested in the craft. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Calloway's?
Sure. Well, like you said, I've been there a long time. I've actually worked there since I think I started receiving my first paycheck at 13. Before that, I just, was under the table. But we specialize in lamp repair and restoration, and we also do custom lighting. So if you see, for example, a lamp in a catalog that you want, but it's $5,000 and you don't have $5,000, bring us the photo. We can sometimes order the parts and do the finishing and we can recreate it, kind of like a dressmaker can recreate something you see on the red carpet, except it's a lamp. We also do a lot of restoration. I love lamps from like the 20s and 30s at Art Nouveau. It's one of my favorite styles. And I actually collect antique parts as well. So some things warrant using old pieces to make it look authentic, and we collect a lot of antique rayon covered wire and things like that to make things look old. We work with a lot of historic buildings around town. Actually, right now I'm working with Eugenia Williams' mansion that's in Knoxville. I've got about a half dozen. Well, actually, no, I've got about a dozen of their fixtures right now that we're working on. And then, of course, we also do the common lamp repair. You have a lamp that you love that, 2 weeks ago stopped working. You changed the bulb, it doesn't work, bring it to us, we'll fix it.
Yeah. So we've heard these sort of rumors about millennials, and I think both of us are firmly in that category, who don't know how to work with their hands, don't know their calling, they're removed from reality. You're kind of living proof that that's not the case. So what is it that you love most about what you do?
Oh, I like using my hands. If I didn't grow up with a father who had a lighting store, I probably would be some type of mechanic or something, something where I get my hands dirty. I get to use tools all day. That's just it makes me smile, makes me happy, and that's what I like to do.
So when I knew you, you were in theater a little bit back in high school. Mm-hmm. And then you had the lamp shop is something that you always sort of did as an occupation. We're working at the weekends. Tell us a little bit about that kind of like post-grad journey that you had in terms of occupation, because I know you had a slight detour in the middle of coming back to the lamp shop. So what was it that really drove you to continue the business, and what sort of drove you to your other parts of your career path?
Well, I mean, like I said, I'd worked there practically my whole life. So I thought real hard about college. I didn't have a lot of motivation to do anything different. I really enjoyed what I was doing, and it was an established business, and it was kind of a nice piece of property too. So I thought, if I like this, maybe I'll stay where I am, and in a couple of years, we'll see what I do. So I went right to work out of high school. I'd take a little bit of a wild man sabbatical, but then I got back to work. But then later, as we started talking about, is this something I'm going to do, the rest of my life? I got a little panicky, and I wanted to do something a little wild, so I joined the Marines. I didn't even tell my father. I said, I said, I was thinking about doing that. I was thinking about joining the Marines or maybe the Army. He said, well, if you're going to do it, do the Marines. I'm going to do it all the way. So, and I had some friends that were Marines, and they were stationed in the unit that is in town on the reserve side. They're combat engineers. And I was literally with them, hanging around a fire. We'd had some refreshments, and we're all re-enlisting because they'd gone to Iraq and they wanted to go to Afghanistan. And I was like, well, I don't have any kids. I don't have a spouse. No one's really depending on me. I'm in pretty good physical shape, and I like running and jumping and climbing and doing all that stuff. So I should do my civil duty and I guess fight for our freedom as my father and both my grandparents did. So I joined the Marines, and I think I called my dad and said, "Hey, I joined the Marines yesterday." He said, "You did what?" Because he was ready to retire, and he couldn't retire because I was going to be gone. But I did it on the reserve side, so I still was able to work at the store after a couple of years of training, and then I deployed in the travel time for about 13 months at that time, and I came back. And after seeing that, I was like, I like it right here. I want to stay here, and so I settled back and worked in the store, and it just fit. It was always a good fit. I missed it. And here
Yeah. So
you won.
what was it like being in the Marines, sort of in the wake of the second Iraq War and the ongoing war on terror in Afghanistan? Because I mean, you didn't join like some people in our age group immediately
Right.
after school, like whenever we were in the thick of that before we had declared war on Iraq for the second time. But so what was that kind of like period like, after Bush, when Obama was sort of settled in, and these were going on, but they weren't necessarily like grabbing the same levels of headlines?
I don't know. I mean, I don't. Where I was at such a low level, I don't know what they were doing, but I mean, I joined at 26. I deployed. I was right on the cusp of turning 30. So I'm running and gunning with all these, kids that are 20 and 22. I mean, some of them can't drink, which is kind of sad that, you're over there fighting a war. You can't even have a beer. But, I mean, it was, I'm glad I did it a little bit later. If I had done it when I was younger, I might have done a lot more of it, which might have made me a little crazy or crazier. Uh, but I did it later in life, so I don't feel that I have as many of the hangups as a lot of young people do. That went from high school and living at home to now I'm digging a hole in the dirt because I need somewhere to sleep tonight. In between firefights. But it was. I mean, I was a combat engineer, so my job was to find IDs for the most part. I mean, we build bombs, we build buildings, we take them down. But my job over there was, for the most part, I was swinging a metal detector and digging in the dirt every day. And the locals were thrilled. They loved us being there. The people that just want to live and just want to farm and make kids and raise them. I mean, they were happy that we were there because while we were there, they were relatively safe. When we weren't there, which is aftermath or even before, I mean, who knows? You have these small fractions of thugs or wannabe, gangs that are not necessarily the Taliban or ISIS or Al Qaeda. They just fall under that umbrella. They're just very territorial, kind of like the movie The Warriors. I mean, everyone has their own kind of area, and when you and it's scary for those who don't want to live that life. They just want to, they're born in Afghanistan and, they kind of feel stuck there. So, but while we were there, they were relatively safe. A lot of the mullahs, a lot of the elders would come to us and say, listen, I want to farm and I've got a bomb that is in my field somewhere. Can you please find it? And we would do that and then they'd get back to work. So I think, what I did at least was a good thing, was a positive thing that we were over there, at least for the short time.
So yeah, I mean, you had that detour in life, and then you came back to Calloway's. Did you have any similarities? Do you feel like that experience affected your work whenever you got back in a way that maybe it didn't beforehand?
Kind of, maybe. and I'm only going to, I mean, there is kind of I mean, I work with electricity. I work with wires, lots of wires sometimes. And so, going into somebody who can either take apart or find or build a bomb, which uses wires, I felt very at home. And over there, they use whatever they can to counter our there's mobility and counter mobility. So we're trying to move forward. They're trying to counter it by setting in bombs and laying traps and things. And the way they do it is, I mean, they'll strip lamp cord and they'll wrap it around a piece of wood and a piece of wood and put some foam in between it, or cut up their sandals and make a pressure plate. And I mean, they're pretty creative with very little. We would spend millions of dollars on one thing and they would counter it with, 40 feet and $2 worth of lamp cord. Kind of felt like a losing battle sometimes, but I guess you could look at that and say, "Ooh, that's a clever way to do that. I can use that in my lamp repair later."
So one of my favorite things, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, I'm a major fan of your Instagram page, and I know we've talked before that you've got somebody that's in charge of that, but you do these amazing videos where you're just kind of like walking audiences through what's in the store. And I think Geneva's got some of those. She showed them a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know how well our sound can be, but I would urge everybody to check those out. You just got like such a great stage presence on the local scene. So, how has social media affected this business of yours? Because I mean, 1946 is a long time. I mean, you're predating social media by over half a century, and the business is now in this sort of contemporary era. So how do you feel that relationship has sort of dovetailed with your business goals?
Well, it's funny. You kind of have to, our business has been here for a long time, and you have to evolve with everything around you. And so personally, I might not have been, I'm not a social media influencer. I'm not trying to make a living being on camera. But if I want to reach the audience that that my competitors are reaching, or that I should be reaching, you kind of have to, it's like, I don't know. It's like, "Oh, brother, where art thou?" We're not one at a time, and we're not, we're mass communicating. So now I've got to learn how to mass communicate. And I do get people that have actually called us and said, "Listen, I live in Seattle, Washington. I love that lamp. I want to buy it. Can you ship it to me?" And we go, "Yeah, all day long. We'll ship you whatever you want." So we do reach a wider range, and I get to have a little bit of fun. Some of the videos, I don't watch all the videos. I try to I try to do them in one take. You mentioned Ghostbusters, and I'm excited about that too. I kind of try to Bill Murray, the ones I go, "All right, I have no idea what I'm going to say. Just start it, and I'll do it in one take. And as long as it's not awful, that's it. Just, if I trip over myself, then there you go." So I'm always thinking about channeling the one take Bill Murray when I do those. But it's fun. It's kind of something that I want to do, but you also kind of feel a little obligated to, I think, to stay current.
Yeah. Well, I think what really hits with it is just how genuine it is. I think the Bill Murray analogy really is apt there, because you're not putting a filter on. You're just like a cool guy. What he's talking about. You've got like the great wardrobe in the pictures. So like you have this nice sense of sincerity in your videos, to where I think like a lot of people just don't. Like it's so desperate often on social media, and like it's clear you give a shit, which is awesome. Right. But at the same time, like you seem like you also don't have time for all of that other crap.
I don't have time to polish all those things.
Yeah. And something else that I wanted to bring up that we've had conversations about in the past is the quality of products, especially now that we're sort of in this global marketplace. Where somebody has this IKEA lamp that they bought for $5, and it might last you the year if you're lucky. It might last 2 years. So, how does an organization like yours that makes these custom products, that really believes in the craft of what you're doing, contend with this sort of single serve forced obsolescence market that we've got now for electronics, where the fridge that's been running for 10 years is now in my garage, and I'm on my second like fancy LG Wi-Fi fridge that I've had since I bought my house. You know,
Mm-hmm.
how do you compete in this market? How do you sort of stake your claim?
Well, I buy and use the best parts I can find. Um, this is going to be a little specific and kind of nerdy, but I mean, for example, chandeliers. Most of your chandeliers that have the little candelabra sockets, the smaller than standard size, they have phenolic sockets. Those are the black plastic sockets. Some people call them bakelite. Those sockets are they're plastic and aluminum and maybe some other fiber type insulation in there that they have in there, but mostly those are the components. I don't use those. I use porcelain ones. I use the porcelain ones because the porcelain is, first of all, a phenomenal insulator. That's why we still use it today. And it lasts for years and years and years. It's not going to burn up. It's not going to get hot and swell or crack or dry out like the plastic will, like the phenolic will. I made a decision years ago to only use those in that scenario. And I try to, our philosophy is you bring the lamp in, we will make it just as good as you bought it or better. If we have the opportunity to make it better, we will. I mean, unless it's crazy expensive, then we'll discuss that with you. But I'm pretty competitive, and I want us to be the best. How about that? I want us to be the best repair place you can bring your lamp to.
So, what are some of the pitfalls? We've talked about this too, just in general. Like, you've got your business; it's been going since 1946. You've been working there since high school,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're in charge. COVID hits. We're in this particular economic situation that we've not really been in as a country before. What is it like for a small business owner in this climate right now?
It's tough. I mean, it can be. I've been, the nice thing about us is 1946, long time. We've been open a long time. So we've seen these highs and lows, and I remember, when I was a kid with my father, when he was running the shop and he would say, listen, it's a bad year. It's a bad month. We're not doing too good. All right. We're going to go in the closet. We're going to eat not the closet, the pantry. We're going to go in the pantry and eat whatever we have. We're not going out to dinner this week or this month or this quarter. And so you just have to tighten your belt sometimes. And the reason you have to do that is because, like you said, the climate. So my revenue, thank goodness, it did drop a little bit, but it's about the same as it was a few years ago. So it's fairly steady. But my expenses have gone up. So my payroll has gone up because, I want to be a fair guy. Inflation hits, they hit me just as much as they hit my employees. So, when that happens, everyone kind of gets an automatic raise because I want to retain my employees. I want them happy and I want them working hard. That's just the fair thing to do. But my revenue doesn't change. So my payroll has gone up. My cost of goods have gone up. My cost of parts have gone up, but my revenue is the same. So I'm taking the pay cut. But when you've done that for years and years, you kind of go, okay, just tighten that belt a little bit. And maybe we don't need, let's order the parts and the pieces that we need, that we know we have to have, and the extra fancy stuff that we think, well, let's try this. Let's try it next year. You gotta stay afloat. So. But we're pretty busy with people moving on the other side of that, with people moving to Tennessee. My repair business has increased, so we're stepping a little bit away from the retail side and focusing more on repair right now because that's what's paying the bills.
Yeah, and that seems to be the refrain. Anytime I talk to a business owner for the pamphleteer, I was actually at a maternity store in Hendersonville yesterday, and sort of the influx of people that's coming from California, coming from some of these other areas, has really affected Tennessee's culture in ways that are positive, but also ways that are negative. What's it been like? Because you own your building, correct? Like, this is a building that's been in private ownership for a while. So, have you seen any sort of increase in property taxes or any of that's been happening over the past years as we've had this influx of people coming in?
Well, yeah. I mean, as I was just telling, I don't know, somebody 2 days ago. About 5 years ago, my property taxes were, I don't know, almost a third of what they are now. Um, and that makes it harder too. So I had to tighten. There's another notch on the belt to tighten to. Um, so there are certain things that, like, I need a new driveway. I would love a new driveway, but I'm still paying the mortgage on the building and property taxes. I mean, God, they're so high. It just it chips away at all these little things I want to do to make my store look nice and to progress here. And yeah, it makes it hard. I hope it's going somewhere good. Um, but yeah.
So do you get frustrated? Because something that has really bothered me about the state of Tennessee in general, we're this like beacon for economics, but then
Mm-hmm.
you have all of these local cities like Knoxville or Nashville, but also our state government that is giving these massive tax relief plans to businesses like Amazon or Smile Direct Club, which just
Mm-hmm.
went bankrupt after they got all of these tax breaks. And it seems in a lot of ways like these small businesses that are making up the communities that make them interesting, livable places that people want to become part of that community. They're the ones that are left holding the bag. You've got your property tax. It's the third 5 years ago. That's now massive, massive expense for you. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about sort of this like economic plan? Because we have this reputation as this hub for economic activity, but this is something that I've heard from a lot of people who own small businesses is the main thing that they sort of have to deal with is their local governments basically increasing their expenses at every possible turn.
Yeah, it's not cool. I have, well, okay. Um, for example, some small businesses that may not be in Tennessee are my shade manufacturers. They're domestic shade manufacturers, and some of them did not survive COVID, which is terrible because the import shades, some of them are great, some of them aren't as good. But you can't call the import shade company and say, "Hey, I like this shade. Can you do it in purple?" No, because they had to, they got to go to China or India or Mexico, wherever they're having these things made, and they're going to have to order 10,000 of them to get that color made in that size because it's a big manufacturer. They have to do a run. These local, these domestic manufacturers, um, they can do anything you want. But with the fewer they are, that there are now, that the less options I have and the less options you have as a customer. And so that's a good example of kind of, I don't know. I mean, it's such a big issue. I mean, I just keep my nose on the grindstone and kind of focus on what we need to do um, to stay afloat. But yeah, I mean, I got my PPP loan. It was very small. I only had to close for a handful of months, but it did it did help a little bit. I mean, I spent 85% of it on my employees. Now I didn't have that write off that year, so my net income went up, which put me in another tax bracket, which wasn't cool. So that was an indirect, but the offset was a net benefit. I would guess. But I know people that took advantage of that. I know people that almost started businesses with a PPP loan and different things like that. Uh, I don't know how they did it. I don't know. I mean, I guess lie, cheat, and steal. I don't think about things like that. I'm not good at that stuff. I'm just good at, I'm good at doing the right thing, I suppose. But yeah, I'd love some of that money. I don't need the money. I just need the break. Just give me a break. Let me thrive. Give me what I would want more than anything for small businesses and just taxpayers in general. Give us a bigger incentive to be charitable. Don't raise the bracket. Like my charity, I still donate a few $1,000s a year to charities, but it's not tax deductible really because it doesn't meet the certain threshold. Lower the threshold and give me double the credit. You know what would happen? people would be more charitable, which we are. Americans are very charitable, very generous to one another, especially some of those big businesses. I mean, it's a big write-off, but I can't donate $90 million to somebody, to a charity. Do things like that, and then I would imagine that the end result would be, I mean, you wouldn't have to spend as much taxpayer money on these things because they would have enough private donations to meet the needs, at least in a small way.
Yeah, I mean, and I can tell you, working with nonprofits on my film festival and some other ventures, a lot of nonprofits are hurting for that very reason after COVID. It's just because there was so much loss that happened, either businesses not being able to donate, being down to the bone, property taxes increasing, or businesses having to shutter altogether or try to make up that deficit they lost because they were non-essential, that they're not able to go and fund an organization that gives people with disabilities technological products that are going to improve their lives or something like that in a way that's got less red tape to deal with. So I can see that being very frustrating. Something else that I think is just really cool about what you do is, you have this sort of like utilitarian element of it. Like, you've got to make the wires work. Right. You've got to make sure that the house is not going to burn down. But Absolutely. There is this like absolute artistry to it as well. Like, I've seen a lot of the creations that you've made, a lot of these lamps. So can you share with us like some of your, like the best lamps you've created or some of the best creative projects that you've done while working at Calloway's?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I like the old lamps. I like the really old lamps. My favorite thing, personally, just Ledbetter, my favorite thing, and I was telling somebody this the other day, is working on like bronze gasoliers. Now, I know that sounds silly, but in those old Western movies, when you walk into the saloon, you've got that gas fixture that's hanging that looks like a chandelier. It is. It's a gasolier. They're called gasoliers, and a lot of them are so well made and so handmade that the arms, for example, when you take them apart, they'll have little numbers that are engraved into the bronze or into the brass or copper or whatever it is, iron. And one fixture in particular, a European one that I worked on, I don't know, probably 15 years ago, they were using Roman numerals, which was so cool. So like every time I take it apart, it was like, okay. And I always take pictures of everything so I know where everything goes. But I was taking it apart and I was like, oh, that's a V. And I was like, oh, that's a V. Oh my gosh, they don't just go together, they line up, the numbers lined up. And just, kind of touching back on what you were talking about, a lot of the disposal, lamps that are made today where you use it, it stops working, it's not worth fixing because it was $15 or whatever, you throw it in the trash, you buy another one. Some people say, well, maybe they couldn't do it back then, they couldn't do it, or people just, that's hard to do nowadays. No, it wasn't hard to do. People were doing better craftsmanship, 100 and 200 years ago. It's just that artistry went away. Like I used to be able to, 20 years ago, I used to be able to get a piece of glass cut that's round and beveled, and they could do some etching in it. They could etch a flower in it. Those artists are gone. That's what I like to see. I like the really unique. I like it really old. I like to see the waves. I like to see that somebody put detail where there didn't need to be detail. They did it because it represented them and the love and care that they wanted to put into what they made. In fact, I actually have a lamp. I'm going to pull it up here real quick because I'm crazy. That I was working on just the other day, and it's sitting on my desk here in my office because it is very old and very delicate and probably fairly valuable. And I didn't want it, hanging around the other lamps, getting, someone bang into it. I'll be right back. Let me plug it in, and I'll show you what I mean. Get it plugged in here. I didn't think about this, but since we're talking about it, look at this bad boy right here. So look how tall it is. So this is big. This is probably a mixed material of brass and bronze. And then, but what I really like about it is down here. See, you got this family. Let me turn it this way. You got a family. They're sitting around the fireplace, and Ta-da! So it's got a little light in the fireplace. It's got a handmade brass screen on the fireplace. Somebody did that by hand. It wasn't stamped out, And then of course you've got the next turns the top light on, and then and then it's got both, and then it turns it off. But you can see all that detail work, and you're not going to get that from the lamps that are just sitting in a box at the big box store. And so you're not going to throw this lamp away. Of course not. That would be crazy. You're going to fix it. And as I tell my wife a lot, when we buy lamps for the house, I say, listen, I got a great deal on this lamp. My favorite thing about it is this lamp is old, it's bronze, it was handmade. And in 30 years, if we hate it, we can sell it and we'll probably make a profit. So they're like little investments. And then it's like my portfolio is on my bookshelf,
How old is the lamp you just showed us?
I would say turn of the century.
Oh.
It kind of reminds me of Dresden or Meissen porcelain, but I would have to take it completely apart to try to find stamps and stuff underneath the base, and I'm not going to do that because I don't have to. I don't ask. I'm not going to borrow trouble. But it's a cool fixture. I'm very envious. I want one. But it's not mine.
So one thing that I definitely wanted to make sure to talk to you about, and this is sort of one of my peeves. We've had this like battle of the light bulbs that's sort of become this cultural flashpoint where, George Bush banned incandescent bulbs, and then Trump brought them back, and then now incandescents are on the way out. And a lot of people like myself have like stockpiled the garage with incandescent bulbs. And you've got the LEDs, and this is like a fight in my house. I love the incandescents, and my wife hates them. And she keeps bringing in these newfangled bulbs that she can like connect to her cell phone and make brighter or lower. And I'm like, do we really need that Wi-Fi in the bedroom for the lamps? So what's your opinion on the LED versus incandescent debate?
Well, of course I like incandescent. A lot of the fixtures, especially for what we do, there are certain, sometimes you have to have the incandescents. The LEDs just don't, they don't look right. They don't work right. They're too big. Sometimes they're bigger. LEDs are fairly compact, but once you get into the higher wattages, like you want to replace a 200-watt bulb or a 300-watt bulb, the LED's big. Sometimes they have built-in fans, which can make noise because they actually, the lower wattage LEDs, you can turn it on and hold it with your hand. It's slightly warm, not like an incandescent, which would be hotter. But when they get bigger than that, they actually do still get warm, and they have little fans sometimes inside, kind of like you might have in your computer, like a little cooler. You have a little heat sink in there. You could look up corncob LED bulbs, because I have a few of them in the store, actually, in the basement, because they're super bright. But when I turn them on, you hear it goes, and I'm like, that's so annoying. Could you imagine having this in your home or outside? It's like a bug zapper. But also the old fixtures, they don't look the same. You take let's say you go to Versailles. It's one of my favorite places in the world. Go to Versailles, and you walk down the Hall of Mirrors, and you see these gorgeous bronze and hand-cut crystal chandeliers, and they got these bright, ugly LEDs. It's like putting I don't know. It's like putting I would say a silk hat on a pig, but it's actually the other way around. The pig is the light bulb, because they just don't look good. Now they're working on making them look better. I do carry LED bulbs, and I carry a specific brand, mostly because they do a lot of the lower Kelvin, the 2700, 2900 Kelvin, which is the warmer light, and they're all dimmable. So they seem to be pretty high quality, and I don't have to think too much about, am I buying the wrong spectrum, because I don't want the 5,000 or 6,000 Kelvin spectrum. Those are those very blue, almost surgical, type lights. And LEDs, a little dirty secret about LEDs is they don't, if you have an LED that's 100 watts, let's say it's 100-watt equivalency, and it says it'll last 20 years, fine. Let's say on the 19th year, it's still working. It's not going to be 100 watts. the diodes or whatever the components, they slowly die. I have LED security lights outside because I got to get on a ladder, and I did get tired of changing the halogen bulbs all the time because they do get super hot. So for me, LED was actually an okay choice there. But I have noticed when I look on my security cameras at night and stuff that it's not the same. They're only a few years old, and I've probably lost at least 20% of my light output from them, which I'm not happy with. But also, you know, if you want to be environmentally friendly, one thing, incandescent light bulbs could be made better. People know how to make them better. They don't, because they're not going to make as much of a profit if you buy light bulbs that last 20 and 30 years. So they're made to fail, just like everything today is made to fail. But that said, and same thing with LEDs. Some of them can be duds right out of the box. I know because it's my job to know. And those that use them at home have found that out as well. You know, not everything lasts 20 or 10 years like it says on the box. Some of them last a few months, and then it's like, what happened? But you know, from an environmental stance, I look at it and go, okay, we're taking a bulb that's made of glass, brass, and maybe a little plaster, or some type of, you know, concrete type cement, you know, that keeps the vacuum, and we're replacing that with plastic, and a little aluminum, and then some more plastic, and then, you know, a little computer chip in there that takes the 110 from your wall and breaks it down to the DC current that an LED needs. And then where does that go? Well, that's considered e-waste. And I mean, you know, we have a lot of light bulbs in this country. You're going to want to replace them all with plastic, aren't we? Isn't plastic our enemy? I think it's our enemy. I don't like plastic light bulbs, but you know, I don't know. Maybe there'll be something better that replaces LEDs. Or they'll make them better, hopefully.
I know that has become a cultural flashpoint. So again, the store is Calloway's Lamp and Shade. It's an awesome building in the Bearden neighborhood of Knoxville. And as Rod told us, he ships nationwide, maybe internationally. I don't know. Do you ship internationally too? Or
sure, as long as I can get insurance, I'll ship anything anywhere.
I think we got a guy from Ireland that watches this show, so just in case he's interested in some lamps, you know.
Oh yeah.
That'll work. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
And we'll make sure to put your contact info in our social post about the episode. So have a great weekend, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerod.
Of course. All right. So that was Rod Ledbetter with Calloway's Lamp and Shade. Next, we're going to move on to a different type of lighting. If you've seen the Ghostbusters movies, all those wonderful proton packs and lighting effects and CGI that have been part of the Ghostbusters mythos for years. I had the chance to see Ghostbusters Frozen Empire about a week and a half ago, and I think honestly this is one of my favorite Hollywood franchises. You know, I've been very disappointed, like a lot of people, in much of what Hollywood's been offering these days. One of my major pet peeves is how terrible the CGI looks in just about everything. I recently just saw the new Godzilla X Kong, the new Empire, as it's called. And I was just completely disengaged, interested the entire time, because it was basically just a retread of Planet of the Apes. There wasn't a lot of imagination. Everything felt very cold. The script was just kind of perfunctory. It was there basically for the special effects. There was a bunch of weird world building that I just couldn't get into. And that's really been the case with most franchise movies that I've seen lately, from the most recent Marvel movies and DC movies all the way to something like Godzilla vs. Kong. So, and even Indiana Jones. But Ghostbusters has been different. Over the past couple of years, as we've been rebooting and remaking all of these franchises, you know, those of us that are millennials, when we walk down the toy aisle at a Target or Walmart, it doesn't look that much different than it did back in the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s. The same properties are still dominant. But the Ghostbusters franchise has managed somehow to get beyond the nostalgia. And I wrote about this our first year of the Pamphleteer, whenever I was discussing a bunch of movies that were dealing with nostalgia, like Last Night in Soho, The French Dispatch, Licorice Pizza, and Ghostbusters Afterlife, which was directed by Jason Reitman, the son of the now unfortunately deceased Ivan Reitman, who directed the first two Ghostbusters movies and a bunch of other amazing films throughout the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. But Ghostbusters has figured out a way to make all of this work in a way that other franchises haven't. Something for me that separates Ghostbusters from most of the Hollywood franchises that came out in the 1980s and then we're continually going back to the well for is it's really the only Hollywood series that deals with the relationship between faith and science. Most cases, most literature, most of our debates these days are about this issue of faith and science. And Ghostbusters is really about the relationship between faith and science in a way that we really don't see a lot in our popular culture. I mean, this obviously is not like a faith-based Christian movie or anything like that. I think, especially the original Ghostbusters movies and how edgy they were, how much they pushed the envelope. We're not talking about God's not dead here, but all of these movies have something very interesting to say about the role of belief and the role of gods and mythology and spirituality in our culture. And the original Ghostbusters also was coming out of this time period when there was this sort of late resurgence of the Cold War. And for a brief moment in time, until the Challenger explosion anyway, Hollywood movies and the heroes of Hollywood movies sort of shifted into these heroes of science. So if you think about Indiana Jones as this hero academic, or if you think about the Ghostbusters, or you think about the creator in Short Circuit, or the kids in Weird Science and Real Genius, or Doc Brown in Back to the Future, all of these characters are scientists who are rugged individualists in the same way as somebody like John Wayne would have been 20 years before their release. But they're using science to achieve their hero status. And what was always great about Ghostbusters in the original form was the fact that it was a very populist tale. I mean, these were academics who were doing this groundbreaking work and pushed out of academia. The main enemy of the Ghostbusters franchise is not the ghouls, not the ghosts, but Walter Peck, played by William Atherton. Great actor from everything from Die Hard to Biodome to Real Genius, where he sort of plays the government crony. In the original Ghostbusters, he plays Walter Peck, the head of the EPA who locks the Ghostbusters up. So the Ghostbusters were always battling bureaucracy. They were always sort of battling the world that wouldn't accept them, wouldn't take them seriously. And even when they ended up saving the world, they were then heckled off and everyone acted like that didn't actually happen until the next time that they need them. So they didn't achieve sort of that hero's journey that we think of, which has always made this sort of an underdog franchise. I was really happy with Ghostbusters Afterlife. I know a lot of people had a lot of hatred for the female Ghostbusters that came out in 2016. I thought it was a perfectly fine movie. I don't think it was a Ghostbusters movie. I love seeing Chris Hemsworth and his comedic role there that sort of was the precursor to his amazing turn in the Taika Waititi Thor movies, but didn't work as a Ghostbusters movie. Ghostbusters Afterlife in 2021 and Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, they're Ghostbusters movies. And not only that, they're able to be Ghostbusters movies that are about nostalgia and also very critical of it. The great thing about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, the new version, is not the plot. It's not the fact that we know the Ghostbusters are going to fight a ghost. In this case, the ghost is a demon who uses ice to freeze everything. Also really weird because the villain in the new Godzilla movie is a villain, Godzilla version that breathes ice and caused the Ice Age. So it's interesting on that front. But the plot itself is great. It's a Ghostbusters movie. There's all kinds of humor. There's all kinds of cool special effects that look better than run-of-the-mill CGI because I think some of them were actually practical. But this is a movie that's about generations and how different generations deal with the increasing secularization of America. So in this Ghostbusters movie, we have the original surviving Ghostbusters. Harold Ramis met his unfortunate death early on, which is why it took so long to get a Ghostbusters 3. But in this case, we still have Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, and Ernie Hudson as the 3 original Ghostbusters, and they play very prominent roles. But they're dealing with their own issues. They're dealing with the fact that they might be becoming obsolete. Winston Zeddemore is now the benefactor of the Ghostbusters and doing all kinds of advanced research. But we also have our new Ghostbusters, the Gen Xers, Paul Rudd, who's been a great addition to the franchise. And also in this movie, Patton Oswalt, who is in the New York Public Library and helps the Ghostbusters in a Giles from Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of way. But the Gen Xers are really trying to figure out their place in this world because they're not the original Ghostbusters. They grew up on the original Ghostbusters. Paul Rudd's character references Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters theme song. You might have seen that in the trailer. He's just really excited about Ghostbusters in the kind of nerdy way that a lot of younger people were in the 1980s when they grew up on this franchise. But he's also tasked with coming to terms as a known and is embracing not only his status as a stepfather to the main child hero, but also as a Ghostbuster himself with his girlfriend, played by Carrie Coon. But in this particular iteration of the Ghostbusters, we also have a millennial character played by Kumail Nanjiani, who's an actor that I really like. He kind of almost had his period as like a leading man there for a while, and the movies just didn't really connect, like The Lovebirds and a couple of the other films that he made, like Stuber. But he's always a welcome presence in any movie, and in this case, he plays this sort of slacker heir to this defense group from India that used fire to quell demons, to quell the Ice Age demon. And he's lazy. He doesn't really want to accept his destiny, but he ultimately realizes that he has to do it. He finds his place in the world, just like the younger Gen Z characters played by Finn Wolfhard and McKenna Grace do as well. So, for a blockbuster movie, it really uses its form well. This is a movie that knows it's going to be nostalgic. It knows it's got to work at that level, but it's also got a lot of interesting things to say that most Hollywood movies don't bother with. So, right now, this is easily the best time at the movie theater that I have had this year. So I highly recommend, if you've not seen Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, going ahead and checking that out this week. It's doing okay at the box office. It's not doing great, and that's really a shame. So if you just find yourself with some time on your hands and you want to go see a great movie in the theaters and have a kind of a nice throwback to your youth, you couldn't do a better job than Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. So definitely check it out, and also check out my essay that I wrote about this film in today's edition of The Pamphleteer. And that brings us to our staple of the show, the weekly film rundown. This week's been kind of a breather. We have 15 new releases opening, but we don't have anything major in terms of tentpole movies like Ghostbusters Frozen Empire or last week's Godzilla x Kong Frozen Empire. I don't know why all these Empire movies are coming out. It seems to be a new trend. But we do have some really great stuff that I'm looking forward to seeing here. So the main one that I would say is the pick of the week, which is kind of left field. I didn't really know how I felt about this movie when it was announced, but the trailer blew me away when I saw it last fall. But The First Omen, right? And we're thinking, oh my gosh, why do we need another Omen movie? Why is Hollywood resurrecting another franchise? I don't know what happened here, but it looks amazing. And for those of you who have not seen it, Richard Donner's The Omen is one of the best shot, best executed horror films in the history of the genre. It's an absolutely amazing movie. I had the chance to watch it again over the winter. And, Gregory Peck's in it. It's outstanding. It says a lot about politics and power and being a diplomat in the globalized world, but also a diplomat that is secular and doesn't want to accept faith. Got a lot in common with Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, actually. It's not a movie that its sequels ever rivaled. The sequels were just kind of, not really following through. But whatever they've done with this movie, and you see the trailer here, like stylistically, it looks amazing. The reviews are at 85%. And think of the last time that a reboot of a movie outside of Scream has had that higher ratings. I'm just incredibly excited to see this movie, and I'm sure I'll be reviewing it in the next couple of weeks. So this one is probably my must-see. But there's two other movies I want to talk about this week that are also worth your time. And one is Dev Patel's Monkey Man. So Dev Patel, been the star of Slumdog Millionaire, been kind of a staple in art house movies, was on Aaron Sorkin's TV show, The Newsroom. You probably recognize him, but he's made his directorial debut with this vigilante tale. And just reading the press about how he made this movie and how he broke his foot and then broke his hand. And then in the middle of all of this, actors were bailing out during COVID, and he was just grabbing people off the street to be in this film. It just looks like a triumph. Dev Patel here, you just see again from the trailer. This movie has a very singular style. He's doing something imaginative. This movie was originally bought by Netflix for $30 million, and Netflix didn't think that it would do well with Indian and international audiences. So they sold it, and Jordan Peele stepped in and realized Dev Patel's vision, and also realized that he was sort of coming from a similar position, right? Because Jordan Peele had his amazing comedy show that still makes me laugh before he directed Get Out, Us, and his masterpiece, in my opinion, Nope. And he saw Dev Patel was kind of trying to do the same thing, breaking out of this character role to direct this movie. So he really lobbied for him to get a theatrical release. And this movie's coming out, wide release this weekend. I'm also incredibly excited to see it. I think it's going to be a really great career changer for Dev Patel. We've never really seen him as an action hero. He's got my vote as the next James Bond. I would love to see him in that position because he's really one of the most talented actors of his generation. And this movie just oozes style. It oozes substance as well. So I would definitely recommend this one. My other recommendation for the week is Playing at the Belcourt. It's kind of a big ask, It's a 3-hour Romanian movie called Do Not Expect Much from the End of the World. And it follows a production assistant on some crappy streaming production who is also trying to get a side hustle with an online brand with this fictional character who's friends with Andrew Tate. Romanian cinema is really one of my favorite international cinemas these days. There's just something about the way that the Romanians have navigated the aftermath of the Cold War and the kind of movies that they're making about Romanian life. So I'm planning on making the time later in this week to check out this film. It's not going to be for everybody, but I think it's really a movie that is going to have a lot to say about our current climate, about the social media world. So I'm definitely happy to check this one out as well. I also want to put in a plug for the Belcourt's special event this weekend, which is a 4K restoration of James Cameron's The Abyss. And this is a movie that really takes us back in time. We didn't just have CGI computers doing all of these special effects that were disposable and were really just there to sell stuffed animals or other ancillary products. This is James Cameron shooting a movie underwater. Back in the day when it was vintage James Cameron and it wasn't just Avatar 12. So this movie, when it came out, did not do very well. It had a very high budget for obvious reasons. I've never seen this particular cut of The Abyss, but Cameron painstakingly restored it in 4K. And this is the cut that he wanted audience to see back whenever it was released in 1989. This was a movie that I feel like in a lot of ways was overshadowed by Batman that year and Ghostbusters 2 and Indiana Jones. It kind of came out toward the end of the summer, did okay. One of the few movies of Cameron's that wasn't a runaway blockbuster. I mean, you got to keep in mind, he made Terminator before this and Alien, and then right after this, Terminator 2, True Lies. So this is kind of the outlier in his oeuvre, but it's a movie that I'm really looking forward to seeing this weekend because I've never experienced it on a big screen. And the Belcourt should really be praised for bringing some of this stuff back in ways that we don't really have the opportunity to see very often. We could always stream The Abyss. Who wants to stream The Abyss, though, really? We got a couple other releases coming out this week. For the full rundown, you can check out the Pamphleteers newsletter today. But I mean, there's a wealth of options this week, including going to see Ghostbusters if you haven't already seen it. And that concludes our weekly film rundown, as well as the rest of our show. So I just want to say, as always, whatever you do this weekend, give it some thought, and we'll be back here next week. Have a great one.